Hello, everybody. I'm Debra Diamond, Curator of South and Southeast Asian Art at the Freer Gallery of Art and the Arthur M. Sackler Gallery, which together are the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. And I am delighted to welcome you to the series of concerts, Transcendence, a Sufi music festival. The Music Festival is one of a series of Freer Sackler public events that explore intersections between religion and art. They were made possible by a generous grant from the Lilly Foundation's Religion and Cultural Institutions Initiative, and our Sufi concerts allow us to consider how we present religious ideas, expressions, and practices that are primarily oral rather than visual. It's an honor for me to present today's musicians, and it's also great to virtually welcome them back because two of them, the renowned vocalist Anwar Khan, a Padma Shri recipient, and Gazi Khan, the kartâl player, were here in Washington, D.C. in 2002. And they transfixed thousands of us at performances at the Smithsonian's Silk Road Folklife Festival, as well as at the museum. And today, in turn, it's a great treat to see them performing in their home state of Rajasthan, the desert. Today's program is immeasurably, I think, improved by our guest speaker, Dr. Scott Kugle, who will introduce the musicians, and then he's going to return at the end of the program for about 10 minutes to speak about Sufi Manganiyar cultural context and the meaning of the songs. He is a professor in the Department of Middle Eastern and South Asian Studies at Emory University in Atlanta, and Dr. Kugle's research focuses on Sufism, Islamic society in South Asia, gender issues, meditation practices, and sacred music. Fluent in Arabic, Urdu, and Persian, he's the author of 7 books, including Sufis and Saints' Bodies, Corporeality and Sacred Power in Islam, and he is currently writing a book on qawwali and Sufi music in South Asia. Welcome, Scott. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. Is my voice coming through fine? So come with me now to a land without borders, where the furthest horizon seems right there before you, ready to touch. What I'm speaking about is Rajasthan's Jaisalmer district, on the very edge of modern India, bordering the Thar Desert, with Sindh just across the border in what is now Pakistan. What's enforced today as a heavily militarized border never used to exist. And the music you're going to hear comes from that era when no borders existed. Caravan routes and long distance trade connected Rajasthan, which we now associate with India, with the regions of Sindh and Punjab, which we now think of as part of Pakistan, along the Indus River. And that's where Sufism first became well-rooted in medieval India before spreading to every part of the subcontinent. Sufis, that is mystical Muslims, Muslims with a mystical orientation and practice to their religion, settled in India and found innovative ways to communicate the Islamic message of ethics, love, and union with the divine. Music and poetry were central to their success. In the communities that thrived on long-distance caravan trade, there evolved Sufi-inflected folk music sung by the Manganiyar and the Langa communities, 2 communities that live very close by each other in the Jaisalmer region of Rajasthan. This is a music that is pulsating and earthy in its percussion, but also ethereal and haunting in its melodies, as you'll be able to taste for yourselves in just a moment. This music delivers to us the Sufi message of universal love and compassion, of the Creator's intimate involvement with us creatures, and of God's pulsing in our very arteries, just as in everything that exists around us. It delivers a call to leave every parochial chauvinism and personal arrogance, and to live our lives as if we ourselves were a melody, beautiful right now in the present, but in a moment blown away as if on a desert breeze. The Manganiyar and Langa singers and musicians deliver to us the poems of great Sufi poets of Sindh and Punjab. These are poets who thrived in the 18th and 19th centuries when the vernacular languages were gaining popularity. That is, previous poets were writing mainly in Persian, but in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, the vernacular languages of Sindhi and Punjabi gained a new vibrancy. And we have poets like Baba Bulle Shah or Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai of Punjab and Sindh, also Sachal Sarmast in Sindh, and then many anonymous poets like those who praised Lal Shahbaz Qalandar, the great saint of Sindh, who's buried in Sehwan. And we'll hear poems incorporating lyrics by these poets in just a moment when the singers begin. A note about the instruments, because they may not be familiar to you. The Manganiyars sing with a heavy dose of percussion on the dholak, that is the barrel drum, and the kartâl. These are wooden knockers or castanets that add a particularly particularly Rajasthani quality to the music. They also play on a bowed lute called the kamanchiya, which is very similar to the name of the kamanche, an Iranian stick fiddle, which you may hear later in this series when we have Iranian Sufi musicians playing. They play also on the sarangi, which is a more courtly, narrow-bodied bowed lute with resonating strings behind the main gut strings. They play the satâra, which is a double-tubed flute, and the morchang, which is a mouth harp, sometimes in the West called a Jew's harp. It makes a lovely buzzing metallic sound. Other instruments that are played, but you might not hear them in today's performance, are the sarinda, which is a narrow-bodied folk-style lute that is bowed, the bapang, which is a drum attached to a string, so that it's a variable tension drum that almost sings. The harmonium, of course, which was borrowed from the Portuguese and Christian missionaries, and is a hand organ that is sometimes adapted to this music, and the sorna, or the oboe. The songs that you're going to hear follow a certain pattern of unfolding. They start with a drone to establish the bass pitch. This is usually on a bowed instrument like sarangi or kamanche. And then you'll have the alap portion, which is an improvisation to establish the raga or the melody. It's sung without any rhythm, and it's often sung in what's called akar, meaning a melody without words, usually just with ah or certain syllables to establish the melody. That will move into what's called the astai, or the bass melody, followed by the antara, or a higher register variation of the melody. And these will vary back and forth between the bass melody and a higher register variation. And when that song begins in earnest, you'll also hear the percussion begin. And that's what's called the tal, or the rhythmic cycle. The ragas, or melodic modes that you hear, are related to Sindhi ragas, often called surs, rather than to the more well-known ragas of Hindustani classical music, which have been adapted into qawwali. And this is one of the main differences between qawwali as Indian Sufi music, which you may be familiar with, and this more folk regional variety in Rajasthan. The tals of Manganiyar and Langa music also have slightly different names from the rhythm cycles of Hindustani classical music. And this points to the musical particularity of this region called Marwar, the region that includes Jaisalmer and Barmar, where our musicians sing and are living. A basic song might be about 5 minutes in length, but in response to an appreciative audience, improvisations can extend a song to 20 minutes or more. I'll give you much more context at the end of the performance when I have a chance to talk to you again. But let me now introduce to you the performers and invite them to sing for you from their home on the edge of the Thar Desert in Rajasthan. Our esteemed performers today are Anwar Khan Manganiyar, the lead vocalist. Talab Khan Manganiyar is also singing, Ghewar Khan Manganiyar, who's playing the kamanchiya. Mehardeen Khan Langa, who plays the sarangi, a bowed instrument, and also the satâra, the double flute. Roshan Mehardeen Langa, who will be singing. Gazi Khan Barna, a very famous musician who plays the kartâl, or those wooden castanets that you'll hear clicking and clacking in a kind of acrobatic way in the background. Feiruz Khan Manganiyar, who plays the dholak, or the barrel drum. Roshan Anwar Khan, who sings vocals. And we thank also Sawaï Khan Barna for the production and live production of this performance. And so now I invite the Manganiyar and Langa singers to perform for us Sufi songs from the Thar Desert in Rajasthan.
Divana group will singing first song, Sufi music, Baba Bule Shah. So these all are the famous musicians from Divana group. So please hear Sufi music. Ant bahar di khabar n kahi rangi rang banaya. कंजरी वणिया मेरी इज्जत ना घट दी मैं को नच के यार मनावन दे आखे पीर बुले शायो दियो जाने सानू अपनी तोड़ न भाए रंगी रंग बनाया मौला सैया आदमी बनाया वो अंत बाहर दी खबर नकारी रंगी रंग बनाया अंत बाहर दी खबर नकारी रंगी रंग बनाया रंगी रंग बनाया रंग बनाया अल्लाह सही आदमी बनाया मौला सही आदमी बनाया अंत बाहर दी खबर नकारी रंगी रंग बनाया अंत बाहर दी खबर नकारी रंगी रंग बनाया बाजी बकरी पुतला जोड़ बनाया हाण बाजी घर बाजी बकरी पुतला जोड़ बनाया वो गली गली विच ढोल बजंदा गली गली विच ढोल बजंदा आजू इश्क नचाया ओ आजू इश्क नचाया अंत बाहर दी खबर नकारी So we have next song, that also from Baba Bule Shah. And name of the song, Alfat in bin on bin Nukta Yar Padaya. This is also Baba Bule Shah song, sung by Divana Group.
दिल विच तार इश्क दी वजदी दिल विच तार इश्क दी वजदी नाल वजदी खंजरी नच के बुला यार मना ले ते को लोग कहन प्या कंजरी मिया बोला चल बुलिया चलियो थे चल जिथे सार में ना कोई साडी जात पहचान ना कोई साथ मने बुलिया मस्त मस्त अलस्ती मस्ती सूफी रन सदा सूफी रन रे रे रन सदा सूफी रन सदा
ਅਲਫਿਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਿਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਰਾਜੂ ਸਬਕ ਸਿਖਾਇਆ ਰਾਜੂ ਸਬਕ ਸਿਖਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਿਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਿਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਅਬਦੁੱਲਾ ਘਰ ਬੇਟਾ ਜਾਇਆ ਬਿਸਮਿਲ੍ਲਾ ਕਰ ਝੋਲੀ ਪਾਇਆ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਅਬਦੁੱਲਾ ਘਰ ਬੇਟਾ ਜਾਇਆ ਬਿਸਮਿਲ੍ਲਾ ਕਰ ਝੋਲੀ ਪਾਇਆ ਅੱਲਾ ਇਮਾਨ ਮੁਹੰਮਦ ਦੇ ਅੱਲਾ ਇਮਾਨ ਮੁਹੰਮਦ ਦੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਲਮਾ ਪਾਕ ਪੜਾ ਹੋ ਕਲਮਾ ਪਾਕ ਪੜਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਬਿਸਮਿਲ੍ਲਾ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਹਿਰਾ ਜ਼ਬਰਾ ਕੁਲ ਵਲਾ ਦੀ ਤਕਿਆ ਦਬਰਾ ਬਿਸਮਿਲ੍ਲਾ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਹਿਰਾ ਜ਼ਬਰਾ ਬਿਸਮਿਲ੍ਲਾ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਹਿਰਾ ਜ਼ਬਰਾ ਹੋ ਬਿਸਮਿਲ੍ਲਾ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਹਿਰਾ ਜ਼ਬਰਾ ਕੁਲ ਵਲਾ ਦੀ ਤਕਿਆ ਦਬਰਾ ਬਿਸਮਿਲ੍ਲਾ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਹਿਰਾ ਜ਼ਬਰਾ ਕੁਲ ਵਲਾ ਦੀ ਤਕਿਆ ਦਬਰਾ ਪਰ ਬਿਸਮਿਲ੍ਲਾ ਮੁਰਗਾ ਖੋਲੋ ਅਰੇ ਬਿਸਮਿਲ੍ਲਾ ਮੁਰਗਾ ਖੋਲੋ ਨਬੀ ਕੇ ਨੂਰ ਦਿਖਾਇਆ ਹੋ ਨਬੀ ਕੇ ਨੂਰ ਦਿਖਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਰਾਜੂ ਸਬਕ ਸਿਖਾਇਆ ਓ ਰਾਜੂ ਸਬਕ ਸਿਖਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਆਖੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ਼ਾ ਹਰ ਮਹਤਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਤੀ ਨਾਮ ਧਰਾਇਆ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਤੀ ਨਾਮ ਧਰਾਇਆ ਮੰਦ ਕੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਛੇਰਾ ਛਮ ਛਮ ਬਾਦ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਤੇਰਾ ਜਮ 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 ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਤੇਰਾ ਜਮ 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 ਰੁਕਣਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਹੋ ਰੁਕਣਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਅਲਫਤ ਇਨ ਬਿਨ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਯਾਰ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਸਨ ਰਾਜੂ ਸਬਕ ਸਿਖਾਇਆ
So now we have traditional instrument of the Manganiyar, we call that kamanchiya. And Langa's traditional instrument, we call that Sindhi sarangi. So kamanchiya and Sindhi sarangi, they are playing on raga, they are making duet. So now we have one more Sufi song, Shah Latif. बाड़ों के खान बोल, मिठड़ी बोली बोल. ये is also sung by Diwan. Shah Latif.
शाबाश मूसी कद गुजारियो तडी मुझो पुन लव्यो सोरया मूं पास ओ जडिया मुझो पुन अचजो बेचारा व्या हल्या झीलती होला हो आ मरी दे मनड़ा
नंग छडे नागा थया पण नागन केड़ो नंग केड़ो नंग आ गड आई गिरनार जो गड आई गिरनार जो जे में सामन जलियो संग मिया ओ अल्लाह अल्लाह निका वजायूं मुरलियूं निका चोरम चंग रोहल लगो रंग लाहू थी लकाल चवे ओ लकाल जो ना मरी विंदस मनड़ा बाड़ो के सान बोल मरी विंदस मनड़ा बाड़ो के सान बोल बाड़ो के सान बोल मिठड़ी बोली बोल मिठड़ी बोली बोल हाय मनड़ा बाड़ो के सान बोल मरी विंदस मनड़ा बाड़ो के सान मन
So this is the kartâl and dholak duet. So now we have to sing one more Sufi song. Name of the song is Damad Mast Kalandar. And we have this tradition, the how to transmission our Manganiyar's children. So they both Indian musician and they want to teach to their children. So they sing Damadam Mast Kalandar Sufi music. So I invite their children to come to sing that song.
I'm sorry, I can't stand up because I have problem. I can't stand up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Please watch us, please hear us. This is Divana group of Thar Desert Langas and Manganiyar group. They are all the senior musicians. So there are Mr. Anwar Khan is main vocalist, Talab Khan vocalist, Roshan Khan vocalist, Roshan Khan also vocalist, Ghewar Khan on the kamanchiya, Mehardeen on Sindhi sarangi, Feiruz Khan on dholak, myself Gazi Khan, I am playing kartâl. And they all are the children.
Thank you.
That was marvelous. The Manganiyar and Langa musicians from Jaisalmer. And it's a little bit hard to speak after a performance like that. But I figure that for some of you, that may be the first time listening to Sufi folk music from this borderland between India and Pakistan. And maybe you want a little bit more context. So the good folks at the Smithsonian have asked me to try to provide that for you. And so I guess the place to start is with God. So there are many, many ways that the singers and the poets that they're interpreting for us have of addressing God. You don't hear the word Allah very much, And that's part of the beauty of this music, is its vernacular and earthy quality. Try to bring God as close to the ground as possible. And so the musicians have many other names or ways of addressing God. You may have heard Mawla a lot. Mawla, ya Mawla, ya Mawla. Mawla means, O Lord. And it's addressed to God. It's also addressed to a person who one esteems as a respected teacher. So very often Mawla is addressed to Mawla Ali. That is Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was the cousin and the son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, was seen to be the fount of sainthood in Islam, the anchor of all the Sufi chains of initiation that go back toward the Prophet. They go back through Ali. So Mawla is a way of addressing God. Mawla Ali is a way of addressing a esteemed spiritual teacher like Ali. You may have heard the musicians also saying the word Sayan. Sayan is a Punjabi and Sindhi way of saying, O Lord, or Master. They also address God by saying Yar, which means, O beloved friend. So even closer, the same word you would use for your best buddy, Yar, or your romantic lover, that's also a word that this poetry uses for God. And you can hear those, if you're an attentive listener, you hear Mawla, Sayan, or Yar over and over again. About the Sufi poets whose verses were sung, the first song and the second song were both attributed to Baba Bulle Shah. Baba Bulle Shah is one of the most beloved Punjabi Sufi poets. His actual name was Sayyid Abdullah Shah Jilani. And he died in around 1757. He was from Uch, the famous city that's now in Punjab. It's a city right on the Indus River where Sindh meets Punjab. And it was a center for Sufism for centuries. And from here, Sufism spread into Gujarat, toward Delhi and other places through the Suhrawardi Sufi order. So Baba Bulle Shah was born there. He sort of breathed in Sufism just through the soil in Uch. He belonged to the Qadri Sufi order, and it's descended from Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, the great Sufi from Baghdad. And he traveled all over Punjab, Baba Bulle Shah did, before he died at Kasur, which is now in Pakistan. That's where his dargah is. The lyrics to that first song would translate into something like, nobody knows the nature of Allah and God's divine manifestation. Ant bahar di khabar kahi rangi rang banaya. And into that basic lyrics by Baba Bulle Shah, I thought I heard some lyrics by another poet, Sachal Sarmast, a Sindhi Sufi poet, again from the 18th century, who's buried in Daraza in Khairpur, which is now in Pakistan. And I thought those lyrics that I heard were Habil Qabil, Adam ke jaya, bolo Adam kiska jaya, which means Cain and Abel. Those are the children of Adam, if you remember the biblical story. Abel and Cain were the children of Adam, but tell me, whose child is Adam? The Lord takes on human form. Oh, how you make us dance. Adami ban ayare dola kesa nachna chaya. So this, I offer you just little snippets of the lyrics so you can get a sense of the Sufi message that's coming through. That, okay, God is transcendent and created everything, and yet where do humans come from? Cain and Abel came from Adam. Tell me, where did Adam come from? Whose child is Adam? The answer, suggested by the poet, is Adam is God's child. And so we are all God's children. And God makes us dance and sing, taking on human form through human destiny by controlling what we do. And this image of God playing with us like toys or manipulating us like puppets, making us dance like a great drummer, Ken, are common images in this Sufi poetry from Punjab and Sindh. The second song is again based on a poem by Baba Bulle Shah, Ulfat in bin Nukta Yar, and Ik Nukta Yar Padhaya Hai. I have learned a secret, says Baba Bulle Shah. God is the same from this end to that. It's only we who are in a turmoil in this world, but I have learned a secret. It's the secret that God comes in the shape of Punu to fall in love with Sasi. And here, Baba Bulle Shah and many of these Sufi poets are drawing on the great love epics from Sindh and Punjab, like Sasi Punu. Punu was a prince in Sindh, and Sasi was a poor girl from the washer people's caste, the caste that washed clothes in the river. Their marriage would have been impossible, an aristocrat and a common person, and yet they loved over all obstacles. And Sufi poets use these great love epics from Sindh to talk about God's love for people, overcoming all obstacles and challenging us to also love with that kind of great love. The third song, of course, was a jugalbandi. It was a duet between the two kinds of bowed lute that are used in this music, the sarangi, which is an hourglass-shaped, rather courtly instrument that is played by specialists from the Langa community, and the kamanchiya, which is a more full-bodied, rounded lute that's played by the Manganiyar community. They both have a similar sound, but technically they're different instruments. And that was a duet showing the kind of stringed melody and rhythm combinations that come out of this music. The fourth song was based on lyrics. Again, it was sung, and these are lyrics by Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, a Sufi poet from interior Sindh. He died around 1752. Shah Abdul Latif was from the place called Bit Sharif. That's where his dargah is now. And that's where the famous ajrak cloth, this block printed dark maroon and blue cloth, comes from. Many of the musicians from these communities wear ajrak cloth as a sign of their allegiance to the Sufi poets of Sindh. That poem was Baro ke khan bol mitti boli bol. Speak from your heart, don't speak badly, make your heart sweet. Make your words sweet and kind for your neighbor and the people around you. It stresses the ethical quality of the teaching. And so many of the Sufi poems are not always about rapture and love of God, but also about proper ethics, the good adab, husne adab, which many Sufi teachers have said is the very heart of Sufism. There are some sayings which go like that Sufism is completely adab. Sufism is completely good ethics. If you don't know how to treat your neighbor, you don't know how to treat God. And on the Sindhi poetry of Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, which Shah Abdul Latif composed into a book called the Risalo, or the Message, where each chapter is named after a different raga. In Sindhi, they're known as the Asur. So each one of them, the chapter of the book is named after a raga to which it's supposed to be sung. And these chapters of the book by Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai is one of the classics of Sufi poetry in Sindh. You can read, other scholars have written about Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, namely Anne-Marie Schimmel, you know, the great European scholar of Sufism, who was one of the first people to really pay Sindhi vernacular poetry and Punjabi poetry close attention as a scholar of Sufism. So her book called Pain and Grace deals with the life of Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, because his name comes from the word, the servant of the graceful one, which is one of the names of God, Shah Abdul Latif. The fifth song that they played for us was another jugalbandi, but between the percussive instruments, the dholak, that is the barrel drum, which is the basis for all Sufi music from different regions of India, Pakistan, and the kartâl, those wooden castanets that you hear clicking and clacking and grabbing your attention in the background of the music. Those two percussive instruments did a jugalbandi, or a duet, in the fifth song that they played for us. And that kind of percussion solo is a new feature of this Manganiyar music, which comes out of the new performance context. I can talk about that in a bit. The sixth song, of course, is one that maybe most of you were familiar with. It's a very famous folk song that comes from Sindh, Damadam Mast Qalandar. It's a tribute to the great saint Sayyid Usman Marwandi, who was more popularly known as Lal Shahbaz Qalandar. He was a very early Sufi. He died in about 1274, one of the first Sufis to come to the Indus Valley and settle. And his dargah at Sehwan Sharif is very famous for bringing Hindus and Muslims together. Hindus in Sindh and Muslims in Sindh all respect him as a great Sufi teacher. He also brings together Sunni and Shi'i Muslims because Shi'i Muslims respect him as a representative of Ali, the first Imam, and Sunnis respect him as a great Sufi saint. The words of that song are Damad Dam Mast Qalandar, Saki Shahbaz Qalandar, Ali Dam Dam De Andar. It goes on and on. In every breath is rapture, O Qalandar. Qalandar means a Sufi who is so intoxicated that they leave behind all law and custom. They don't care about social custom or ritual norms anymore. In every breath is rapture, O Qalandar, O generous noble falcon, O Qalandar. Shahbaz was the name of this saint. It actually means a noble falcon that sits on the hand of the king. Ali is under each breath. Ali is within every breath. Ali dam dam de andar. There are many interesting contemporary books that you could read. I'll name just a few of them for those of you who want to go out and read more about Sufi music from this region, the borderlands between Rajasthan and Sindh. You could read Peter Panka's book, Saints and Singers, Sufi Music of the Indus Valley, or the German ethnomusicologist and anthropologist named Jürgen Frembgen, Frembgen, Frembgen. He's written a book called Nocturnal Music in the Land of the Sufis, the Unheard Pakistan. Or a new book by Richard Wolff, who's an ethnomusicologist who specializes in percussion. His book is called The Voice of the Drum, Music, Language, and Emotion in Islamic at South Asia. And although he covers all of South Asia, he has some sections on Sindh and Punjab and the kind of drumming that goes on in these communities. Let me just speak for a couple of moments about the singers themselves, because they're very distinctive, the communities that they come from. The Manganiyar and the Langa communities are from this region. I mentioned the name before, Marwar. It's the desert region in Rajasthan that extends all the way to Jaisalmer and up to the border in the Thar Desert. The Rajput chiefs and merchant communities who became very wealthy in this region, who were mostly Hindu, upper caste Hindus, had communities to serve them, to recite their genealogies, to entertain their guests and other merchants who were traveling through with poems and with songs. And this was the traditional occupation of the Manganiyar community. They were singers who would recite poetry and genealogy of the Rajput chiefs that they served. They usually lived in their own settlements called dhanis in Rajasthani, which are outside the main villages. As a caste, the Manganiyars are Muslims, but the patrons of their community were usually upper caste Hindus, Rajputs. And so their musical and poetic skill crossed boundaries of religion and class in the form of caste. The Langa community nearby are a similarly placed Muslim community, but their patrons were mostly Muslims of a community called Sindhi Sipahi. The Langas are a much smaller community, traditionally distinct from the Manganiyars, but in the last few decades, the two groups have begun to come together and do musical collaborations. When people from this community are singing for Hindu patrons, they would often sing devotional hymns to local goddesses like Tejaji, or during festivals like Diwali and Holi, when they might sing songs for Krishna. When singing for Muslim patrons, they would often sing praise songs for the Sufi saints that were so influential on both sides of the Thar Desert, along the Indus River in cities like Multan, Uch, and Sehwan, and in Rajasthani towns further south like Ajmer and Nagaur, where the Chishti Sufi order was very powerful. You can read about the Manganiyar and the Langa communities in an ethnographic study, and this is probably the most detailed study out there, called Bards, Ballads, and Boundaries, 3 Bs, Bards, Ballads, and Boundaries, an ethnographic atlas of the musical traditions of West Rajasthan. It's by Daniel Neumann, Shubha Chaudhry, and Komal Kotri. And the fact that this book is written by 3 very able scholars shows the kind of range of topics that the music covers. It takes a collaboration of 3 minds to try to write about it. Daniel Neumann, of course, being a very famous ethnomusicologist who teaches at UCLA, is an expert on North Indian music. Shubha Chaudhry is the director of the Ethnomusicology Archive in Delhi, run by the American Institute for Indian Studies, and many scholars from here in the US who go to India know her and have taken great help from her as the director of the Ethnomusicology Archive. And finally, Komal Kotri is a very important person. He's a folklorist from Jodhpur in Rajasthan who founded a folklore institute. And it's really through his work that the Manganiyar and Langa communities' music has thrived in the 20th and 21st centuries. Komal Kotri began to promote Manganiyar music in the 1960s. He started organizing tours for them, first throughout India and then internationally. And with his help, Manganiyar performers began to perform outside of their village contexts, beyond traditional Rajput patrons. Their instrumentation also began to change, emphasizing the percussion more forcefully, with the dholak and the kartâl coming forward in the music. Komal Kotri also encouraged Manganiyars to play with Langa musicians, so to overcome traditional caste boundaries between these musician groups and to form new and innovative ensembles together. And so Langa musicians who were traditionally experts on the sarangi and instruments like the surna, a kind of oboe, began to join with Manganiyar musicians and bring these instruments into those ensembles. And the performance you just witnessed is a great example of that. We had both Manganiyar musicians and Langa musicians playing together. As folk singers, the repertoire is never static. These singers change songs as their patrons demand and as they receive positive feedback from audiences in terms of salary, support, fame, and travel. And so they're continually reaching out and adapting new songs into their repertoire. And there are, in the contemporary period, new opportunities for them to play. The Jaisalmer Desert Festival, which happens every year, provided great new performance context for folk musicians like Gazi Khan Barna, who was the kartâl player in our ensemble and was the one who was sitting on a chair and apologized at the end very kindly for not being able to stand and not being able to sit on the earth, which is the traditional way that a musician would sing, because he has some problem with his knees. Modern Indian films have also started to pick up Manganiyar songs. You may know the famous Bollywood film Hum Dil De Chuke Hai Sanam, which has a great song called Nimbura, Little Lucky Lime, Nimbura, Nimbura, Nimbura. And it's become a famous song. It's actually based on a Rajasthani folk song that Manganiyars used to sing. Manganiyar musicians have also been featured in films like Lachodrome, the famous documentary about the Roma culture, the gypsies, so-called, of Europe, who probably have roots in Rajasthan. And the instrumentation of some gypsy music has been traced back to the folk music of Rajasthan that one can hear preserved till today in Manganiyar music. So any of you that have seen Lachodrome may have heard Manganiyar music featured there. that's a bit of the context of where they come from and why the musicians wanted to perform for you near their native village with the desert as a backdrop. Because even when they practice and perform internationally on stages in Paris or Washington, D.C. or London, these small villages where their music has its home actually feed and nurture the spirit of their music. And so they like to take people back to that desert setting whenever possible. And if any of you are lucky enough to travel out to Jaisalmer in Ajmer, you can probably hear groups of musicians that come from the Manganiyar or Langa communities performing in desert settings. Well, that is the context that I wanted to share for you. I hope that we have time now to open it for questions that you might have.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today for this sort of extraordinary break in our regular existence. Thank you very much to Scott, to the musicians, of course, to Alan Weber, who organized this, Sana Mirza, Lizzie Stein, Masame Farhad, Andy Finch, Hutomo Wakasuno, and so many others. Kara Nola made this possible.